Okay, lesson 36. We continue with the philosophy of the Kleshas, with your misery. According to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 2, Sutra 16. It's one of my favorites. The misery which is not yet come can and is to be avoided. Many of the sutras that we read are very difficult to understand. But this one leaves no doubt about its meaning. Basically, it's Patanjali's way of saying, don't be stupid. Is that necessary? Yes. We always do stupid things. That's why accidents happen. This is not funny. I make it funny, but it's actually not funny because it's tragic. It's tragic because we have no control. We know. Well, sometimes we don't, but often we do. We know that smoking is bad. And yet, many people continue. I know it's difficult to quit. I have smoked since childhood, and I quit 20 years ago. It's not easy to quit, but since I started practicing yoga, it became important because I knew it's not good. So when we discussed pratyahara, I told you about the process of how I did that in a playful way. We all know that one day we become old. Do we know, looking at other old people, that aging comes with disease? It cannot be avoided overall, 100%. One day we will all die. But there is a huge difference between aging and aging healthy. You know, when I just have a simple flu, a simple cold, I feel so miserable. Not because of the disease, but I mean not the physical aspect of the disease. How can I say this? I feel so miserable for just for being sick. Even knowing that in 4 or 5 days it will be gone and it won't come back for another year or so. But just a flu. It makes me think, how would it be to have to live with a constant disease? Not a flu 5 days and then another year being healthy, but diabetes or rheumatism or something that doesn't come and go, but is almost permanent. What I'm trying to say here is, we all know that we will get old someday. We delude ourselves, we lie to ourselves thinking that, you know, all those old people, they get sick, but I will stay healthy. But it doesn't work like that. If you want to age in good health, you have to start working now. Start taking care of yourself now. In the gym where I had my studio in World Gym, there was an older lady in her. She's now in her late 70s, and she really worshipped me. She really admired me. She loved my classes. She introduced me to influential people, and really, I really didn't think I deserved all that attention. But the thing is, she felt really good doing yoga properly in a traditional way. She's one of the affluent people that live in Yoido. Yoido has many rich people. People who all rode the wave of economic growth after the Second World War. She has many apartments spread out. She's rich. But she was a dean of a middle school. So she's in education. She has connections at the Seoul City Hall and what have you. A very nice, gentle, and wise old lady. A long story, but the point is, one day she confessed to me, she said, I like your classes so much, and it feels so good, but I should have started 30 years ago. All her life she had been busy being the head of a school, but also, of course, gathering wealth. Then, when her body started to decline in her 60s, late 60s, early 70s, she came to the conclusion that she should start doing some maintenance. So she did, only to come to the conclusion that the damage that's already there does not heal anymore at that age. So all you can do is patch things up a little bit and kind of hobble forward. But in spite of the effort that she's doing, coming to the gym every day, not being able to restore health, only to kind of maintain it on a mediocre level. So this is important. When you're young, you lay the foundation. And you then must maintain that. Why is this important? I imagine having a flu, already feeling so miserable about it. I can't imagine suffering through life with chronic diseases, permanent diseases, that many old people do indeed get as a result of aging. But there are examples of people who age in dignity without all the diseases, accompanying diseases. You have to do something for that. Do maintenance. Eat healthy foods, exercise. You don't have to be fanatic about exercise, but move. The body is an organism that needs to move. If it doesn't move, it just starts falling apart. And the older you get, the more it falls apart. People don't want to think about getting old, so they don't prepare. But like that wonderful lady who admires me so much, who regrets so much that she didn't start taking care of herself when it mattered, when it still mattered, when it could have mattered. That makes you think. And we are not stupid, we know. We just have to admit it, acknowledge it. misery that has not come can and is to be avoided. There are so many ways that we experience misery that can be avoided. And according to Patanjali, should be avoided if we're not stupid. We live in the age of the mobile phone, the smartphone. So, did you ever notice when you walk in the street that everybody's walking like this? People cross the road like this. And then they are surprised they get hit by a car. Patanjali mentions this issue because as yogis we naturally become mindful. We live in a world where people proudly say, I do multitasking. But there's nothing to be proud of with multitasking, because multitasking means doing several things at the same time with mediocre outcome. You cannot be successfully completing several tasks at the same time because your attention is scattered. So the priorities lie wrong here. Although we are proud of being able to multitask, we don't get any satisfaction from doing things successfully, doing them right, properly. Yoga practitioners naturally become too sensitive to be able to multitask because it makes you restless, it disturbs you. So you naturally want to do one thing at a time. And that is what you do when you cross a road. We do everything in a daily routine, totally ignorant of the fact that there are some very dangerous aspects to life. Crossing a road is very dangerous if you don't pay attention. As a pedestrian, you're very vulnerable. And in your subconscious, you rely on the traffic lights. So, the light is green, so you walk and you continue with your activity on your phone. But there are now and then people who jump the red light. And that is when you get seriously hurt or killed. When you cross the road, you should just do that. Watch left and right. And as a yogi, you will develop the power of anticipation. That means that when you cross a road, you know that it is dangerous, that there is potential danger, risk, so you will watch out. Before you set foot on the crosswalk, you will watch, you will look left and right and again, and you will start walking. And while walking, if you see me walking, it looks like my head is bobbing because I cannot stop looking left and right. I have to know what is happening so that if somebody jumps the red light, I will be out of the way. You become so sensitive, you just cannot. You cannot just walk looking at your phone. But you must also start implementing these kind of things in life. Or you can say that practically all accidents, either in traffic, but also domestic accidents, they happen because we are not paying attention. Because we are, one way or another, we are distracted. So accidents can be avoided. And that is what Patanjali is saying here. So for a large part, not always, disease can be avoided if we try to get rid of behavior that in the long term leads to bad health. Accidents can be avoided if only we start paying attention. We start practicing mindfulness. Do one thing at a time. And that includes simple thing like crossing a road. People who are calling while driving, and even worse if they are texting while driving, they are a great danger on the road. They drive like as if they are drunk, and sometimes even worse. So don't. But try. If you drive, try. Because that phone has a very magic influence on us because of ego. The moment that you hear a katok or your ego makes you want to know who it is that is calling me. Me? Somebody's calling me. You have to know. Even though you know that you shouldn't, but you cannot control your hand that takes the phone and has to look. But you must. You must. Think to yourself, okay, you feel the ego coming in and saying, oh, who is this? Who wants to have my attention? Then you say, no, I'm driving now. I will have a look at my phone when I arrive at my destination. Or if you think it is something important, you control your urge and you park your car at a gas station or somewhere in a safe place, not in the middle of the road, of course. You park your car before you actually check your phone. This sounds really crazy, huh? But it's important. Many accidents happen because of people on the phone. These days, you know, in the Netherlands, all over the world, statistics are being kept. People started driving cars in the early last century. So many people died. There were no lines on the road. Many roads were not paved. There were no traffic lights. There were no crosswalks. Bicycles and cars and pedestrians were not separated, etc. So over the decades, that has little by little been upgraded. Statistics show that per 100,000 inhabitants, the number of deaths has constantly decreased in the last century until the mobile phone came. In the past years, at least in the Netherlands, the percentage of casualties in traffic for the first time in like 100 years is actually starting to increase again. While the roads become safer and safer, while driving education, it becomes more and more extensive and more strict to follow. So the phone has many blessings, but it can be a very dangerous thing if you cannot control the use of it. The misery which is not yet come can and must be avoided. That applies also to the conflicts that we have in life. The more and more sensitive and conscious we become, the more and more we know which situations will trigger our samskaras. We, in contrast with how we functioned before, we can already recognize a situation before it is actually unfolding. The next sutras will be a little bit about that. You learn to anticipate conflict before it has actually even manifested. The difficulty here is, again, to control ego. Because of ego, we just go along with the wave of disharmony that leads to the conflict. Because ego thinks that it is what we must do. I must stand up for myself. I must react. I must. That is ego kicking in. But you have developed the power of observation. And you observe already in your subconsciousness. You know that if you allow this to unfold, it's going to explode. It will lead to conflict. It will lead to misery. And in the beginning you will notice that you do it anyway, that you allow it to happen anyway. But you will then look back, see what you did wrong, and use that insight next time to try to not allow it to unfold, to try to not allow it to manifest. It takes a lot of work, but it will make life so much more easier, more peaceful, but relationships and your ability to maintain them will become much more harmonious, much more constructive, and much more void of conflict. Conflict that in unconditioned state we think are just part of life and relationships. Another aspect of the sutra is, as a yogi, as a increasingly sensitive and conscious human being, you start becoming more and more aware of other people's suffering, and naturally you want to help. Forgetting your very important lesson that misery is there to teach us. So we become a little bit overzealous in trying to help people deal with their misery. What happens when we do that, of course with good intention, is we deny the other person the opportunity to learn and grow from the misery that they are in. Of course, sometimes people never learn anything at all, but that is not your problem. If you solve the problem for them, it will simply happen again. I have an anecdote for you. On the surface, a sad story, a lot of, well, let me just stick to the facts. In the when I came to Korea, eventually I became involved with my partner at that time, with whom I've been together for 11 years. And she had 3 brothers and 1 sister. And my partner was the oldest of the family. So there were 5 siblings. Her sister is deaf-mute. You understand deaf-mute? The deaf, and because she's deaf, speaking is also very difficult. That sister was married with a man who's also deaf-mute. But they had 2 daughters who were both normal. I mean, normal in the sense that they had their hearing intact and were able to speak. Now, not only the family but society considered mom and dad as 장애인? 뭐예요? 영어로 장애인?
Disabled?
Yeah, disabled. Yeah, right. So thank you. Society and also the other siblings consider them to be disabled, pitiful, in need of help. You know what happened? They had no responsibility at all. Their daughters were growing up to be no good, started bullying kids in schools, smoking with other kids behind the school. They were going nowhere, and the parents, they couldn't keep a job. My partner had her own business, and she would constantly try to give them a job so they can make some money and take care of themselves. So they would just start, for example, and then a week later, when they had a little itch or something, whatever, they would just not show up. So, because they were a family, they had their own house, which was, of course, provided by the other siblings. Then every 3 months, they would knock our door, come with a fan of bills, and say, Oni, older sister, Oni, they disconnected the internet, they disconnected gas, they disconnected electricity. Please help. So Oni would collect money from the other siblings and pay all the bills and call all the utility companies to restore the internet, the gas, and the electricity. You know what? When they made a little bit of money, they wouldn't pay the bills. They would have a party, ordering chicken and pizza and drink beer. They had the newest flat screen TV before anybody else had it. They would have computer games to play with, and the rest of the family is suffering. I mean, they were happy, no responsibility. So I see what is going on there, and at some point I tell my partner, I said, you really have to stop helping them, because this is a vicious cycle that will never end until they learn to take care of themselves. I was very aware of the misery that I was about to unleash, but I couldn't see it anymore. It happened again and again, and it was just an endless cycle that made the whole family basically suffer, except them. So I was the boogeyman, because actually they stopped helping. And this is what happened. They were kicked out of their house. They were moved to a neighborhood where poor people live, supported by the government. So it looks like a apartment, flat, but with very small, tiny units. The units are so small, it's almost the size of your normal bathroom. Very, very tiny. But there they lived, at least for a while. Sometimes we brought them some shoppings. I gave them some money once in a while. Not too much, but just some money. I did feel sorry, but they were now on their own. And then the transformation came. It took a little while, but Mom started her own business. She started her own business selling accessories in Uijeongbu, in the street stall. She bought her own car from that money that she earned, and she bought an apartment, a decent apartment with 3 bedrooms on the 22nd floor of a brand new apartment complex. Just amazing. She developed self-respect, and the girls, they are in their 20s now, but they don't even remember how bad they were when they were so young. They were gangsters. They had no self-esteem, no self-respect, and they try to make up for that, to compensate for that by bullying and basically criminal behavior. They were kicked out of school several times. They had to go to another elementary school because of that. So, just amazing. And what you see happening is we stopped solving their misery. And they started to learn very valuable lessons about themselves and about life. And it led to a total transformation. They were not disabled anymore, in spite of the fact that they are deaf-mute. But it did cause a lot of waves. They divorced as a result of all the instability that occurred. Of course, they came together again when things settled down. I caused a lot of misery, but the price that I paid for that was worth it because of the incredible outcome. It's an extreme example of how you should not help people solve their problems. Because as long as you keep doing that, they don't learn, they don't grow. What you can do, of course, because you have a heart, is try to help them wherever you can without taking on the burden of their problem. But just give a little support. Give some advice, give some hints what they could possibly do. But when it comes to the actual problem, they have to confront that problem themselves. Otherwise, it will simply repeat. It will come back again and again. I told you on a couple of occasions that as a yogi you have to have a lot of courage. And it is these kind of things that really require that you trust your heart. You almost say gut feeling, but that's something else. You trust your heart and you do what you know is the best thing to do in the long term. Even when you know that it is going to cause short-term suffering, misery. Yep. Sutra 17. The cause of that which is to be avoided is the union of the seer and the seen. Once I heard a Buddhist monk say, it's just what it is. Like a cup of water is just a cup of water. This sutra tells us that we are conditioned to put labels on situations and also on people that determine whether we feel good or whether we feel bad. And of course, because that's simply human nature, we have a tendency towards the negative. We have this awkward tendency to be attracted to misery, to negativity. That's because of contraction of energy, because of tamas. Yoga, Patanjali, and that monk are actually saying, it's just as it is. Stop labeling things good or bad. Try to connect with the essence of what you're dealing with. It will save you a lot of suffering. That is what this sutra is basically saying. The problem is that our consciousness, Purusha, soul consciousness, is looking at things, situations, people, in a very objective way, without labeling. Just get to the essence of what you are dealing with and act accordingly in a constructive way, without losing time and energy, lots of energy, with emotions, good or bad, negative or positive. It's all, good or bad, it's all energy, and it's all a loss of energy. But there is not only soul consciousness, which is very refined and very subtle, so subtle that most people have no idea that it's even existing, that it's even functioning within them. Because the mind is very loud. The voice of the mind is very loud. And it is the mind, the conditioned mind, that puts labels on everything. And when we label something bad, we feel bad. When we label something good, then we feel happy. We feel good. It sounds a little bit like I'm saying you must live a very boring life without any joy and happiness. It's almost like that. But the point is, if you want to get rid of misery, suffering, which according to Patanjali is unnecessary, can be avoided. If we want to get rid of that, we have to look at it on both sides. Because there is no good and bad, a negative feeling is a movement of energy, a wave of energy. Just as a good feeling, a positive sentiment, is a wave of energy. Of course, as human beings, we try to, at least in the beginning, get rid of the negative. In the beginning, you will still, although you try not to label, you will still subconsciously label good things as good. But at least you're on your way now to get rid of the bad. And that is the starting point. And the good things that it feels good, that there is more good and less bad. But now that you are purifying and getting rid mostly of all the bad things, suffering, misery, conflict, etc., you will get better and better at it. Only the good things remain. And now that only the good things remain, that also becomes a distraction. So it's just a matter of priorities. In the beginning, you focus on getting rid mainly of negative aspects, suffering, misery, conflict, what have you. It can be avoided if you simply pay attention. Just pay attention. Even to the point that you can anticipate it and avoid it overall, that it hasn't even started yet. But when only good emotions remain, when only good waves of energy remain, in the end they become just as disturbing or disharmonizing as the negative ones. Only when they exist both, you prefer the good ones, but when you get rid of the bad ones, the good ones start to distract you. So it's a natural process. Sutra 18. The scene, the objective side of manifestation, consists of the elements and sense organs, is the nature of cognition, activity, and stability, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and has for its purpose providing the Purusha with experience and liberation. So, if you hear me talking about all this, then you think, oh my God, I should never have started practicing yoga because if I continue like this, then life will be so boring. I have to be so strict about everything, and I'm not allowed anything anymore. Not even pleasure is not allowed anymore. But Patanjali doesn't think like that. He doesn't say that you must abandon life on earth and just move to a temple or a monastery and live in isolation. First he says, like I kind of said before, but then in his own way, the seeing, and he uses the word objective, the objective side of manifestation. Here he does what I did with the previous sutra, saying everything is just as it is. There is no good and bad. There is only tamas, rajas, and sattva, and accordingly it will manifest in different ways. That's what he's saying. But the most important of this Sutra 18 is the final sentence, where he says that everything that exists has for its purpose providing Purusha with experience and liberation. Can you follow that? It's a very positive message. It's a message that I have been telling you in various different ways from the beginning of the course. Life is there not for you to suffer through. It's there to provide you, according to Patanjali and in his words, it's there to provide you with experience and liberation. But he uses the word Purusha, which is your soul. From the moment that you start living life in the way that we have been looking at it since the beginning of this course, life and everything in it becomes a stairway to heaven. You start living life consciously. Every aspect of your life becomes an experience that from now on you go through consciously, meaning that you analyze, that you see patterns, that you see the law of cause and effect at work. You draw conclusions, you learn, you grow. And especially where it comes to making mistakes, when you learn from mistakes, you don't make them again. And with that, little by little, you eliminate more and more disharmony from your life. You eliminate more and more failure from life. Conflicts that could have been avoided if only you had paid attention, etc. So, instead of isolating ourselves in a monastery or a temple, where we are not exposed to all these essential lessons that we learn in the normal world, instead of isolating ourselves, we stay with our feet on the ground. We continue with our daily lives. Like human beings, with our work, with our studies, with our hobbies, with our good things, bad things, etc. But from now on, we start to pay attention. And in the previous session, I said that you will see with time, when you look back, you will realize how much you have grown. You will realize the dynamic path that you have been on, leading to growth. And you compare that with your loved ones, the people that you know from the past, and you see that mostly what they did was age, like we all do, and consolidate. stay in their comfort bubble and expand the comfort bubble. Not growing, not developing, not evolving. So we are on a path that is not easy. Much more like anyone else, like anybody else, you have to do effort for things that in the past didn't take any effort at all, but often led to disharmony, suffering of some form or another. Being a yogi means having to do effort, because everything that you do, you now do consciously. But the good news is, you are allowed to be yourself, be human, so that you can learn, so that you can liberate yourself, according to Patanjali. You will see a shift taking place. In the past, you were interested in adventure. So you buy a train ticket and you go to a place, and then you go on an adventure whenever you have a holiday or time, or you wanna have excitement. You go out with friends and drink and dance and have nice meals and what have you, which of course is good. But from external orientation, you will more and more become internally oriented. And very naturally, shift takes place where you are not interested anymore in adventures and excitement, and even vacations become a distraction. Can you imagine? Maybe not yet. But we say every day is a vacation. But not only that, every day is an adventure. When you start living life consciously, every day is an adventure in itself, with new challenges and new also rewards, new lessons learned. There is no need anymore for distraction on an external level, adventures, excitement, and what have you. On the contrary, you will see that it actually starts becoming a distraction. You go out every weekend with your friends, and suddenly you decide to stay home on Friday night or Saturday night, just because it feels right. So your friends will call and say, hey, you're getting old or what? Boring. So you say, you know what, maybe you will find an excuse or so, I don't feel so well tonight, or I want to read a book or something. But next week, they call again, and you think, I'm not that old yet, so let's just go out and enjoy. And you go and you enjoy, but then you find yourself standing in the corner somewhere, overlooking the whole scene, and you think, what the hell am I doing here? Something that you have enjoyed for years, suddenly you're standing there and you find yourself thinking, I'd rather be home now. It was fun, but now it becomes a distraction. Why is it so noisy here? In the past you loved the music, you loved the bass, and now you think, oh my God, why is it so noisy? I can't even hear myself thinking anymore. And of course you think, maybe a little bit sarcastically, you think I'm getting old, but it's an indication of your growth as a spiritual being. So when you say I'm getting old, just do it with a smile, mock yourself. And of course we're all aging, But in the beginning, while your friends continue to enjoy themselves, you may actually feel inadequate. You may feel bad about your increasing need to be on your own. And that is when you have to remind yourself that development is a good thing, not a bad thing. Especially when you're young, it's important that you remember that development shows that you are making huge progress. It is your friends that continue to enjoy all that mayhem, that enjoyment. It's not bad, but when you feel that you don't like it anymore, you have to see that as a good thing, not a bad thing. It shows that you're really evolving, while your friends are not. We have one more. Sutra 19. The stages of the gunas are the particular, the universal, the differentiated and undifferentiated. Now what follows is a little bit scientific and not really practically helpful. The practical explanation of this sutra is that Patanjali here explains that any event, any situation has various stages of development. And you see here the particular is the situation where it has fully manifested. If you take as an example a conflict that you have with a person, you are in the middle of the conflict, fighting with each other. That is the particular. The other three stages, the last stage that is mentioned here is undifferentiated. The seed for the conflict is there, but it hasn't manifested yet. It hasn't been triggered yet. There's maybe not even a contact between you and the person with whom that conflict could evolve, could manifest. But there is something inside you stirring. The differentiated. You feel something stirring, the friti. And it is the point where you could possibly step in and not allow the situation to become particular, to manifest. That is the stage where you have to choose. Ego will make you grab the phone and call that person in question and start yelling at that person. What the hell did you do? And I told you, and then blah, blah, blah. And the person starts yelling back at you. It's ego that makes you grab the phone or in any other way make contact with that person, leading to the full-blown situation. But knowing what you know now, you try to be aware of that stage before it actually manifests and do the difficult task of stepping in and not allowing it to manifest. It's very difficult because emotion, which is inherently related with ego, it always comes together with emotion. Emotion makes you do things you'll later regret. And here you simply have to develop the power, the strength to observe that emotion and say, no, I am the boss. I am the boss. I'm not going to allow this to happen because I know where this is going. I know that this will lead to a full-blown fight, to a conflict, to whatever, disharmony, misery, suffering. And in combination with the previous sutra, you see it simply as a form of training yourself. Maybe today you fail to control your ego, to control your urge to grab the phone and start yelling at that person. Then you look back at the damage that you created in hindsight and simply say, I knew it. I should have controlled myself. I should not have given into that emotion. And you use that for the next time that something like that happens. You remember and you say, I remember. Let's just try to control myself this time. Then you look back in hindsight and you feel good about yourself. You feel good about being able to be in control. It's very empowering. Questions? Yes?
How do you get over if you do something like you do let emotion get the best of you and you do something that you regret? How do you get over the guilt of, like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it sometimes keeps me up at night where I'm like, why did I do that? Because you can see all the damage it caused.
Yes. How do you deal with that? By reminding yourself that you're only human and that you promise yourself that you're next time going to try to avoid it. You cannot turn back the clock. You cannot go back in time. If it has already happened, just accept it. Feel stupid about it for a moment, but be rational. And if possible, apologize if you can. But you cannot turn back the clock. You cannot go back in time. And regret can go both ways. Regret, guilt can go both ways. Either it teaches you something so that you can avoid it in the future, or it can destroy you, which is totally unconstructive. No matter how bad you were in the past, accept it. There are reasons for it. And if you look carefully, you will see that there were circumstances that led to that kind of whatever happened. Accept it. Show compassion to yourself before you can show it to others. It's not possible to show compassion to others if you cannot even extend that to yourself. So, rationalize, learn, and grow. Then it all starts making sense. Then it is all worth it, or has been all worth it. Start teaching yoga. That will be your atonement. Okay. Let's have a short break.